coming up. In the skies above Europe in the Second World War, the German Luftwaffe would produce many skilled and deadly aces. As the Allied gained air superiority, however, many of the best German pilots would be shot down and lost in combat. In this video, however, we will look at one of the most talented Luftwaffe aces of the war in Gunther Rall, who would manage to evade death after being shot down an astounding total of 8 times, yet still coming back to join the Battle of the Skies time and time again. Enjoy. One of the most elite fighter aces in the German Luftwaffe was a pilot by the name of Gunther Rall. This famed aviator is known for being one of the most skilled dogfighters in history, racking up a mind-boggling 275 aerial victories in the Second World War. And although this is quite the impressive feat, what may be just as interesting is how he managed to survive so many close calls throughout his tours of duty. There are many great fighter aces who have been shot down. In fact, I would even venture to say that most of the greatest fighter aces were shot down or very nearly shot down at some point in their careers. Many of these airmen were able to escape death, however, through crash landings and bailing out. Gunther Rall, however, made a habit of these close encounters by being shot down an astonishing total of 8 times in his career. And in some of these, as we will see today, he nearly paid the price with his life. As a young pilot, Rall first saw combat on the Western Front of the war in 1940 when he helped lead JG-52 as they supported the invasion of Belgium and the Battle of France. On the 12th of May of that year, he would achieve his first victory when he shot down a Hawk 75 south of Metz, France. This was a weaker plane that was a model of the P-36 fighter. This victory would occur when Rall saw 3 of the French fighters attacking a German recon plane at 26,000 feet. He dove in and attacked them, shooting down one and driving off the others. He would later say, "I was lucky in my first dogfight, but it gave me a hell of a lot of confidence and a scaring because I was also hit by many rounds." This victory would be his only success on the Western Front. Shortly after this, he would get a grim taste of combat as his unit took heavy losses in the first phases of the Battle of Britain. He attributed these losses to the faulty tactics of tying the 109s to the slow-moving Ju-87 Stuka as escorts. A few months later, he was transferred to Greece, where he would find that things would go much better. He would score his 2nd, 3rd, and 4th kills on Soviet bombers that lacked fighter escort. On August 4th of 1941, he would take down a Soviet fighter for his 5th victory, making him an ace. By the late fall of 1941, Rall and many other pilots in his unit achieved great success in the fighting in the East. He had accelerated his kill tally after gaining experience and skill in the 109, reaching 35 victories as he started to dominate enemy aircraft. Unfortunately for him, things would take a turn for the worst on the 28th of November. On this day, he was on a mission near the city of Rostov, where in the late hours of the evening he would claim his 36th victory over an I-16 fighter. But after this, he let down his guard and watched the burning plane fall to the ground. In this slip-up, a Soviet fighter came behind him and hit his 109 hard, doing major damage to the engine. At this time, he was over enemy territory and did not want to be captured due to the harsh reputation that had been building around the Soviet treatment of German POWs. So he turned and attempted to fly his damaged plane back to friendly territory. He would successfully make it across lines, but would have to crash land his fighter. In this rough landing, he was knocked unconscious and badly injured. Rall was lucky because as he crashed, he was knocked unconscious inside the aircraft. Had things gone slightly differently, his plane could have easily caught fire and burned him inside. Luckily for him, this was not the case and his plane would come to rest with him badly hurt but still alive inside. A German tank crew would later come by and cut the knocked out pilot from the wreckage. He would wake up in a hospital later on where X-rays revealed that he had broken his back in 3 places. It was then that the doctors told him that he was finished as a pilot. During this time, he was essentially paralyzed and his outlook looked bleak at best. Despite this prognosis, Rall defied the odds and made an incredible recovery. He would rejoin the fight and be back on the front less than a year later, but it would not be the last of his brushes with death. An interesting note here is that while he was in the hospital, he would fall in love with a girl named Hertha, who would later become his wife. She had actually helped a group of Jews escape from the Nazis earlier in the war, and was currently suspected by the Gestapo of aiding Jews, but no action was taken against her. Rall would rejoin JG52 in August of 1942, and without hesitation he jumped back into combat like he had not missed a single day. His success was quite impressive for someone who had not seen combat in 9 months, as he would shoot down 26 enemy aircraft in his first month alone. The streak would then continue into the following months, where Rall would achieve his 100th victory in late October. He became the 28th German pilot to reach this milestone and was invited to personally meet Adolf Hitler as a result. Rall would take this opportunity to ask Hitler when the war would be over, and to Rall's surprise, Hitler said that he did not know. This shows us how much disconnect there actually was between the German soldiers on the front lines and Nazi leadership during this time. Rall likely asked this question as he suspected that the end of the conflict was approaching in the near future, while Hitler and the other leaders were dealing with the reality that things are not going quite as well as they had hoped. Regardless, Rall and JG52 continued to fight on and support their ground forces as best they could. By the spring of 1943, Rall had downed 30 more planes as his unit prepared to support the Battle of Kursk. In the first week of May, Gunther Rall would actually take down a Soviet-flown Supermarine Spitfire, which was an alarming development. Up until this point, the Luftwaffe on the Eastern Front had been primarily fighting against weaker planes like the I-16 and P-39. But the Spitfire was a worthy adversary for the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and would not be a great omen for the German forces of things to come. Because of this, when he reported the kill to his superiors, he was instructed to keep this victory to himself as not to hurt the morale of the unit. In addition, Rall noticed that Soviet fighters appeared to be improving their tactics. The results came to be felt quickly. The German ace would be hit hard in a dogfight on July 9th, where he was forced to make another crash landing. In this crash, he was able to bring it down softly and walk away, making it a much better landing than the first one that he had. This would be the second time that he was officially shot down in combat. He would make it back to his home airfield and would be fighting again by the end of the week. But he would quickly find trouble once again. Just 4 days later, he would be involved in another mid-air collision that severely damaged his 109 yet again. This caused Rall to make another forced landing where he would yet again walk away and make it back to his home airfield. This would mark his third time being forced to make a crash landing after combat. It is noteworthy to point out here that these sort of crash landings were not easy on fighter pilots. They often made these landings without landing gear and had to bear the risk of flipping or rolling over, which almost certainly meant death for the pilot. Here are some actual pictures of Gunther Rall's aircraft from some of these crash landings. During these missions, there were a handful of other times that Rall was shot down or damaged so much that he could not make it back to base. The details on these occasions are a little harder to find, but what we do know is that in all of these instances, Rall chose to crash land rather than bail out using his parachute. Nonetheless, he would once again walk away and be fighting again very quickly. By August, as the beleaguered German pilots continued on, Rall surpassed the 200 kill mark. This would come on August 29th of 1943 when he would claim 2 LAGG fighters near the Samara River. This would earn him an in-person medal from Adolf Hitler, as well as significant recognition in Nazi propaganda media. Over the next year, he continued downing Soviet aircraft as the German armies were slowly pushing back. After surpassing 270 kills by April of 1944, he would be transferred back to Germany to defend the Reich from American bombers and fighters. At this point, Germany was on the defensive, and American bombing raids were becoming a serious threat to the homeland, so all available pilots were needed. The job of his Bf-109 unit was to fend off the fighter escorts so the slower Focke-Wulf 190s could engage the bomber formations. This marked the beginning of the end for the German Luftwaffe, as many of the best pilots were wounded and killed. Rall would soon become one of them. On the 12th of May of 1944, exactly 3 years to the date from his first aerial victory, he was flying with his unit on a hunt for American fighter escorts. He located a group of P-47 Thunderbolts and closed in to engage. After jumping on these aircraft and destroying one of the American fighters, his unit was ambushed by another group of P-47s. His plane was hit hard in the radiator, and one of the rounds actually entered his cockpit, taking off his left thumb. We can hear Gunther Rall recall this intense battle here.
They chased me, and we knew exactly the P-47 is much faster as a 109 in a dive, and had a much higher structural strength as a 109. But what can you do? I was chased by 4, almost line abreast. And I turn left, I turn in the bullets. And I turn right, turn in the bullets, pull up, pull. So there was no other choice, and I went down and bang, 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 and all of a sudden, bang, and the thumb was off.
After realizing that there was no escape, he decided to bail out of his fighter. He landed in a tree and rolled down a steep hill after releasing his parachute. He somehow avoided re-injuring his back and made it back to a hospital where they would attempt to bandage and care for his hand. Being shot down 8 times, this would actually be the only time that he would bail out of his plane. Here, he would be hospitalized for many months and would actually later credit this injury to saving his life. Because, had he continued fighting over Germany, he believes that he would have likely been killed by the Americans as they continued to gain air superiority. Following his recovery, he trained Luftwaffe pilots and would enter combat briefly again in 1945 before the end of the war. At the time the conflict ended, he was the 3rd highest scoring fighter ace of the war and had been shot down no less than 8 times. Following the war, Rall would serve in the German Air Force as an advisor and would speak on Nazi war crimes, saying that one of the biggest shortcomings of the German people was their failure to explore the essence and true beliefs of the Nazi regime when they came to power. In the years following his military service time, he was actually also able to fly all of the aircraft that he fought against during the war. He would go on to state that after doing this, he believed that the P-51 Mustang was the best of these aircraft. He would eventually go on to become good friends with Shorty Rankin, the American pilot who actually shot off his thumb in the dogfight in 1944. The very glove that he was wearing on this occasion can currently be seen at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. The legendary German ace would eventually pass away in 2009 at the age of 91. Thank you guys so much for watching this historical recreation. If you want to support my content, please check out my fan store here and make sure to click subscribe right here. And if you want to go above and beyond, feel free to support me on Patreon, which can be found in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.